On the scorched banks of the Ravi River in Punjab, a confrontation once unfolded that made the entire Indian subcontinent hold its breath. From the north, the Mongol horsemen thundered down like a living avalanche, carrying the fearsome legacy of conquerors who had burned and subdued half the known world. From the south, the armies of Delhi forged a living fortress, sharpening steel in defiance, determined to halt the steppe storm at the very gates of their land. This was more than a battle. It was the ultimate test of will, strategy, and survival for both powers. On the muddy, red-tinged waters of the Ravi, amid the roar of war cries and the relentless pounding of hooves, every spear, thrust, and sword strike carved into history a question that would echo for centuries. Would the Ravi bear witness to Delhi's downfall, or mark the place where the legend of defiance against the Mongols was born? And that's exactly why we're here. Welcome to Great History English, where the past isn't just remembered, it's reborn in all its blood, fire, and glory. If this is your first time joining us, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because every day we plunge headfirst into the clash of titans, where mighty empires rise, collide with earth-shaking fury, and sometimes crumble beneath the weight of ambition, steel, and destiny itself. If you've been with us before, you already know what's coming. So lean in, settle down, and let's step onto the battlefield together. In the early 14th century, the Indian subcontinent was at the crossroads of great waves from both east and west. In the far north, the legacy of Genghis Khan still reverberated. Though the Mongol Empire had been divided into several khanates, their military might, particularly the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, still haunted both the Muslim and Hindu worlds. Once civilized centers such as Samarkand, Bukhara, and Baghdad had been ravaged by the hooves of steppe horses. To the northwest of the subcontinent was the Punjab, where the great rivers of the Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, and Ravi converged. This was not only the most fertile belt in South Asia, but also a strategic gateway connecting India to the Iranian plateau and Central Asia via the dangerous passes of the Hindu Kush. For centuries, every force that tried to enter India from the north had to pass through this land. From the Greeks of Alexander the Great, to the Arab armies, to the Turco-Afghan armies that founded the Delhi Sultanate. At the heart of Delhi's power was the Khalji dynasty. Since Alauddin Khalji's accession to the throne in 1296, the dynasty had expanded its territory, strengthened its administrative apparatus, and increased its military power through drastic reforms. In the military, Alauddin introduced the dog, horse branding, and chera soldier identification system, a measure to prevent pay fraud and ensure that every cavalryman had a qualified horse. Each horse was branded individually, and soldier records with portraits and identification were kept in the imperial archives. He maintained a huge standing army in his capital, Delhi, estimated to number hundreds of thousands of men, ready to move quickly to the frontiers whenever the situation required. Alauddin not only concentrated his forces in Delhi, but also deployed them in key citadels, creating a continuous military belt in Punjab, a strategic buffer against invasions from the northwest. He built a network of fortified garrisons, abundant stores of provisions, and cavalry stations connecting Lahore to Dipalpur, Mulan, and the Upper Punjab. Routes of march were paved or reinforced, ensuring that the army could move quickly, even during the rainy season. The frontier units were regularly trained in anti-steppe cavalry tactics, especially in flanking and blocking the retreat. In terms of the economy, the court imposed strict price controls in Delhi, especially on food, war material, and other essential military supplies. The market was monitored by a specialized official, and all hoarding and speculation were severely punished. This greatly reduced the cost of maintaining a huge army for a long time, allowing Alauddin to feed his army year-round without draining the treasury. Land taxes were completely reformed with high rates, but collected directly from the peasants, avoiding leakages through local middlemen. This greatly increased the royal revenue, enough to cover large-scale campaigns. The important trade routes from the Ganges Delta to the Punjab border were placed under the protection of the Royal Army, ensuring both food supplies and the flow of weapons, horses, and precious metals for the manufacture of war tools. On the political front, Alauddin centralized power to an unprecedented extent. He reduced the autonomy of the nobles, limiting their ability to build their own forces or form political alliances capable of challenging the throne. The intelligence and surveillance system was expanded, penetrating both the military and the civilian population to detect early any plots of rebellion, secret connections with foreign powers, or the activities of Mongol spies. Even close generals were not allowed to own large amounts of land or accumulate too much wealth to avoid creating a threat to counterbalance the imperial power. Thanks to all these measures, Delhi under Alauddin Khalji was transformed into an efficient military administrative state, operating like a giant war machine. When necessary, the court could mobilize national power not only to defend the borders, but also to conduct offensive campaigns deep into enemy territory, something that previous dynasties could hardly do continuously. These reforms were not only aimed at maintaining stability and peacetime, but also directly served the needs of war, stemming from Alauddin's profound awareness that the threat from the north would never completely disappear. From the late 13th century to the early 14th century, the Delhi Sultanate faced repeated Mongol attacks. Initially, these were small, fast-moving armies that raided the borders and then withdrew before the Delhi army could react. But over time, the tactics changed. The Mongol armies grew larger, better organized, and were intent on long-term conquest rather than mere pillage. In 1305, the situation became particularly dire. The Chagatai Khanate, which had consolidated its power in Central Asia, decided to launch a large-scale campaign against the subcontinent. The army sent this time was not only composed of skilled nomadic cavalry, but also had infantry, archers, and logistical units sufficient to sustain a long war. Under the command of Taragai and Ali Beg, they crossed the Hindu Kush, entered the Indus Valley, and quickly cleared out Delhi's outposts. The Mongols' strategic objective was to strike directly at Punjab, which was both the first line of defense and a food and supply depot for any army advancing deep into India. They chose to advance towards the Ravi River, not only because it was a natural border that was easy to defend, but also because it was on the shortest route from the border to Delhi. Alauddin Khalji realized that if the Mongols were allowed to cross the Ravi and advance further, the capital would be directly threatened. He immediately sent General Malik Kafur, one of his most talented and loyal commanders, to lead a large army towards Punjab. Kafur was ordered not just to hold the enemy at bay, but to eradicate the threat, sending a clear message that Delhi was no longer a vulnerable target. Both sides understood. If the Delhi army fell, the gates of the subcontinent would be wide open to the hooves of the steppe horses. But if the Mongols were defeated, it would be a blow that would weaken their will for years to come. And as fate would have it, the two armies would meet on the banks of the Ravi River, where the Punjab sun would witness a day of blood and fire. According to the Vedas, the oldest scriptures of Hinduism, the Ravi River was called Iravati, which means the one who gives refreshment. The Greeks called it Hydraut, which means the river of the water snake. The river was also known as Parashani, which means the swift one. The Ravi has been both a channel of trade and a natural defensive barrier. For centuries, any force seeking to enter India from the north had to cross its banks. Its sandy shores and fertile floodplains have been stained with the blood of countless battles, from tribal skirmishes to decisive clashes that determine the fate of empires. In the cultural memory of Punjab, the Ravi is not merely a river. It is the boundary between prosperity and ruin, between freedom and subjugation. On the banks of the sacred river that year, on the cracked earth under the harsh sun of the Punjab dry season, two mighty armies began to prepare for a confrontation that the entire subcontinent knew would determine the fate of the land. To the north, the Mongol army under Taragai and Alibeg advanced into Punjab with an estimated force of 50,000 to 60,000 men, mostly nomadic cavalrymen from the Central Asian steppes. They were natural horsemen, skilled with short bows and long spears, capable of shooting accurately while galloping. In addition, this time they brought with them additional infantry and archers, along with a relatively organized logistical force, a sign that this was not a blitzkrieg, but a planned effort of conquest. They camped on the north bank of the Ravi, using the high ground and the open woods for cover, while attempting to reconnoiter the Delhi army's position. To the south, the Delhi army under Malik Kafur deployed a large force, including the Sultan's elite cavalry, infantry armed with spears and large shields, and long-range archers. This force had the advantage of defensive weapons and armor, especially heavy cavalry trained to withstand direct attacks from Mongol archers. Kafur also deployed light cavalry units to maneuver on the flanks, ready to counterattack or block any incursions. The Delhi army camped on the southern bank of the Ravi, erecting barricades and obstacles of wood, stone, and shallow trenches to prevent Mongol cavalry from charging in. The battlefield was on the Ravi River, near Lahore, an area both open and dangerous. The riverbanks were wide and shallow in the dry season, allowing for crossings at many points, but the current was still strong enough to deter heavy cavalry. The riverine plains, consisting of flat alluvial plains interspersed with high hills and sparse tree cover, provided conditions for cavalry battles but also made any formation vulnerable to observation and attack from a distance. Whoever controlled the high hills and narrow plains would have the advantage of range and defense. Both Taragai and Kafur knew well that a small mistake in choosing the time or place to cross the river would leave their army prey to the arrows and spears of the enemy. The battle at Ravi would be a test not only of numbers versus numbers, but also of steppe tactics and the art of defense and counterattack in medieval Muslim India. At the beginning of the dry season in 1306, when the Ravi River receded to reveal its golden sands and shallow Bangstu Khan, the great Khan of Chagatai, ordered a new campaign to avenge the Mongols' earlier defeat in India. Leading the army was General Kopek. Some sources record him as Quebec, along with other commanders, Ikbalmand and Taibu. The army set out from the Central Asian steppes, crossed the frigid Hindu Kush mountains, crossed the Khyber Pass, entered the Kabul River Valley, and then descended to the Indus River Delta. After passing Attock and advancing through Lahore, they approached the Punjab, the northwestern gateway to the Delhi Sultanate. Kopek's aim was to strike straight into the heart of the Punjab, destroy towns and garrisons, and from there advance deeper into Delhi territory. On the way, the Mongols sacked villages, swept through the fertile plains around Lahore, and finally settled on the north bank of the Ravi River near present-day Shadara. The area had some high ground and open forests, which were good for camping, but water was scarce. Wells quickly dried up, forcing them to try to cross the river early to reach supplies further south. In Delhi, news of the invasion arrived quickly from a network of scouting posts along the Indus-Lahore-Multan Bees route. Sultan Alauddin Khalji responded promptly. He placed General Malik Kafur, a loyal and battle-hardened commander, in overall command of the campaign. To boost morale, Alauddin promised the entire army a year's pay if they defeated the Mongols. Under Kafur were generals Malik Tughlaq, the vanguard, Shonai Bara, the lord of Dipalpur, and Malik Alam. The Delhi army set out from the capital, marched at high speed through Sirhind, advanced to Dipalpur, an important base in the Punjab, and then followed the right bank of the Ravi to block the enemy's path. Tughlaq's vanguard soon encountered Mongol scouts on the outskirts of Lahore and quickly reported the location of Kopek's main army. Ali Kafur decided to choose a stretch of the river near Lahore. where the riverbed was narrow and there were many high mounds to the south as his defense. He built a wooden and stone fortification, dug a shallow trench in front, and placed archers on the mounds to control the range of fire. Behind, the Sultanate's heavy cavalry was ready to charge when ordered, while the light cavalry was deployed on both flanks to harass and block small groups from crossing the river. For hours, the two armies faced each other across the river, neither willing to risk making the first move. Finally, Köpek gave the order to attack. The Mongols opened with volleys of arrows from the north bank as a provocation, then sent a large force across the river at the shallows at noon. Thousands of armored cavalrymen, their horses splashing white water, advanced to the south bank. As soon as the first groups had set foot on the shore, Malik Kafur ordered a general counterattack. The Delhi heavy cavalry charged straight into the formation that had just crossed the river, using long spears and curved swords to cut through the enemy ranks. From the high mounds, the Delhi archers fired heavily at the flooded cavalry, causing many horses and soldiers to be swept away. The Delhi infantry simultaneously closed in on both flanks, closing the encirclement right at the water's edge. The Mongols, accustomed to dry and open terrain, were at a serious disadvantage when forced to fight in the mud and between the barricades. The battle cries, the sound of horses' hooves crushing wet sand, and the clash of metal echoed along the banks of the Ravi. Within a few hours, the Mongol formation was in complete disarray. Many troops were driven back to the river, where the current swept everything away. Köpek, in the confusion, was captured alive just as he was about to be killed by the Delhi soldiers. Some of the remnants of the army fled to the other Mongol forces led by Ikbelmund and Taibu, who were advancing down to Nagar, Rajasthan. However, when they heard of Köpek's defeat, the two generals immediately retreated across the Indus River to Central Asia. The Delhi troops, led by Malik Kafur and Malik Tughlaq, pursued the retreating enemy relentlessly, killing and capturing thousands of soldiers along the way. Within hours, the Mongol formation was in complete disarray. Many troops were driven back to the river, where the current swept away countless warriors. The remaining troops attempted to retreat to the north bank, but were pursued by the Delhi light cavalry into their camp. By dusk, the Ravi had become a graveyard of horses and warriors. Horse carcasses, pieces of armor, broken weapons, and shields floated down the red, silt-filled river. The Mongol campaign had collapsed completely, and this would be the last time during Alauddin Khalji's reign that steppe horses would dare to penetrate deep into Indian territory. The result was an overwhelming victory for Malik Kafur and the Sultanate. Taragai and Ali Beg were forced to withdraw their remaining forces from the Punjab, abandoning their plans to conquer Delhi. In this campaign, Ravi became a symbol of the ability to successfully resist the Mongols at the doorstep of the subcontinent. The victory at Ravi was more than just a single campaign to secure the Punjab. It had strategic implications far beyond the battlefield. First of all, militarily, it was the second time in less than a decade that the Delhi Sultanate had repelled a large Mongol army on its northern frontier. Malik Kafur's organization of a fortified line, using the river terrain to negate the mobility advantage of the Mongol cavalry, became a classic lesson in how to fight steppe warfare under subcontinental conditions. Kopek's campaign was more than a raid. The Mongols had taken women and children with them, indicating their intention to settle permanently in Indian territory after their conquest. However, after their disastrous defeat on the Ravi, all of these, along with a host of defeated soldiers, were taken prisoner by the Delhi army and taken back to the capital. The Mongol losses at the Ravi were heavy. Many Indian epics describe tens of thousands of soldiers killed or drowned while crossing the river, thousands of horses abandoned on the banks, and many generals captured or missing. Although Central Asian and Persian sources are generally silent on the details of this defeat, the hasty withdrawal of Taragai and Alabeg suggests that the campaign was a complete failure. According to the contemporary Persian historian Wasaf, some 60,000 Mongols were killed, including the commander Kopek. Wasaf also records that Sultan Alauddin Khalji ordered a tower of human skulls erected in front of Delhi's Badayan Gate as a warning to posterity. More than half a century later, historian Ziauddin Bahrani maintained that the grisly structure still existed. The 16th century historian Farishta estimated the Mongol camp at 50,000 to 60,000 men. But fewer than 3,000 to 4,000 survived the battle. The remaining men were executed by being trampled by elephants, and the women and children were sold into slavery in Delhi and other parts of India. According to Amir Khusrau, this defeat so terrified the Mongols that they retreated to the Ghazni Mountains and did not launch any further expeditions into India during the reign of Alauddin. General Malik Tughlaq, then governor of Dipalpur, instead took the initiative for several years. He organized annual raids on Kabul, Ghazni, Kandahar, and Garms, regions on the Chagatai Khanat's borders. These lands were repeatedly pillaged, forced to pay tribute, and offered no significant resistance. In his Tughlaq-nama, Amir Khusrau recounts 20 victories by Tughlaq, most of them against the Mongols. Bahrani also confirmed this figure and said that Tughlaq had received an iktafif in Lahore. The Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta, when visiting Multan, found an inscription in the Great Mosque on which Tughlaq claimed to have defeated the Mongols 29 times. Although it is unclear whether these victories included the raids mentioned above, an undated letter from General Bader to Khazar Khan, Alauddin's son, suggests that Delhi's power at this time extended to Ghazni. When Badger's army arrived in the winter, the Mongols there and in the surrounding area accepted Alauddin's protection. Alauddin's name was even chanted as that of the rightful ruler during the Khutbah Friday prayer at the local Jama. This also meant that in political terms, the victory helped Sultan Alauddin Khalji consolidate his absolute prestige within the court and among his vassals. In the context of the Delhi court, always facing the risk of internal rebellion, the defeat of the northern ghost right at the border elevated the Khaljias to the status of a symbol of protection of the subcontinent. At the same time, this defeat made the Mongol Khans in Central Asia more cautious about launching large-scale campaigns into India, at least for more than a decade. The victory at Ravi was the final blow in a series of consecutive Mongol defeats under Alauddin's reign. From Amroha in 1305 to Ravi in 1306. According to John Ricard, this was the last time the Mongols dared to invade India with large forces, and only small raids followed after that. The resilience and effective defense strategy turned the Delhi Sultanate into an impenetrable wall of steel between the fierce steppe and Indian civilization. In the Indian subcontinent's memory, the Ravi is more than just a river. It is a symbol of the boundary between survival and destruction. From the pages of Delhi court histories to the lyrics of Persian poets, the victory at the Ravi is portrayed as the moment when a civilization stood tall against the mightiest invasion of its time. The image of Malik Kafur and the Delhi army lined up on the sandbank, spears pointed at the red silt of the river, has become legendary as a wall of steel to stop the Mongol storm. Punjabi oral traditions tell of how, on the eve of the battle, the Delhi soldiers carved their names on the shafts of their spears, ready to be left there if they fell, as a pledge to protect their motherland. In Indian Islamic epics, Ravi is placed alongside legendary battlefields such as Anjalut in the Levant, where the Mamluks defeated the Mongols, to remind us that the power of the steppe is not indestructible. Scholars of the Khalji era saw it as a testament to the will of Dar al-Islam in Hindustan, that the land could withstand any army provided the people were united and strategy was used at the right moment. More than 6 centuries later, Ravi's name still rings in folk songs, not just because it was a military victory, but because it marked the moment when Delhi ceased to be a shaky defender and became a spiritual bastion for all of South Asia. And from its banks, the message echoes through the generations that there are battles fought not only to save land, but also to save the soul of a nation.